Why did she always park at the far edge of the lot, where no one noticed her? Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was survival. Or maybe it was because blending in had once meant the difference between living and not. Sarah Martinez shut off the engine of her beat-up Honda Civic, the kind of car that didn't draw attention. Not like the shiny BMW in the next slot, or the lifted truck plastered with hunting decals. She sat for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, watching the Saturday crowd flow toward the entrance of Precision Point Range. Families, weekend hobbyists, young soldiers in uniform who still had that eager bounce in their step. She exhaled slowly. She used to walk like that once, before deployments, before the desert heat, before she'd learned how heavy silence could be. The digital clock on her dash read 8:47 a.m. She preferred to be earlier, before the bragging, before the posturing, before the noise that reminded her too much of things she couldn't forget. But last night, her daughter's soccer game had run long, and afterward, she'd been just another suburban mother setting out paper plates and juice boxes at a team. Breakfast. She had promised her daughter she'd stay until every dish was washed. That promise mattered. Now she was here, balancing the two lives she carried, one of them loud and ordinary, the other silent and unforgettable. She popped the trunk. Inside was a canvas bag that had been with her longer than any piece of furniture. She owned worn, scarred, functional. She lifted it out with practiced ease. Inside rested her Glock 19 modified, precise, reliable. A civilian legal AR-15 tuned so carefully that only someone with her kind of hands would know what made it. Different. Nothing flashy, nothing to make her stand out, just tools. The tools she trusted to keep her steady. The glass doors opened with an electronic chime, and the familiar smell of spent gunpowder and cleaning oil washed over her. The crack of rifles, the bass thump of larger calibers, the constant whir of ventilation. To anyone else, it was a hobbyist's haven. To her, it was a faint echo of places where the air always carried that sting. At the counter, a clerk with tattoos scrolling down. Both arms barely looked up from his phone. His voice was monotone, detached. Lane assignment? Anything available, she answered, keeping her tone neutral. Just Sarah Martinez from Maple Street. That was all she ever let people see now. He slid a clipboard across the counter. She signed no rank, no unit designation, just a name. He handed her a lane card. Lane 15, fair warning. The system's been acting up. She accepted without hesitation. Lane 15 was at the farthest edge, the quiet corner, away from the chatter, away from wandering eyes, exactly where she belonged. She pushed through the double doors into the range. And instantly, chaos. Jesus Christ. Get that thing pointed downrange. The safety officer's voice was sharp, commanding. Sarah's eyes snapped to the source. A middle-aged man in fresh tactical gear clutched a malfunctioning rifle, muzzle swinging erratically as he struggled with the jammed bolt. The weapon jerked. In his hands, a brass casing locked halfway, his finger dangerously close to the trigger. Other shooters backed away, voices rising, advice shouted. Fear creeping in, one wrong twitch, and someone could die. Sarah didn't think. Training didn't leave room for hesitation. She moved, slipping through the crowd like water around stone. 23 years of muscle memory took over. 3 steps. A calculated angle, never crossing another's line of fire. She was beside him before he realized. Easy. Her voice was calm, steady, unshakable. She caught the muzzle with her left hand and guided it firmly toward the backstop, her right. Hand moved with precision over the jam. She could feel the panic in the man radiating like heat. Breathe, she told him, her eyes never leaving the weapon. Her fingers knew what to do before her mind framed the problem. Forward assist, pressure, twist, release. The stubborn casing popped free with a metallic ping. She cycled the action. Clean, then handed the rifle back. Double feed, she explained. almost casually. Happens to everyone, just remember muzzle downrange. The man's relief was palpable. His hands trembled as he took the rifle back. Thank you. I don't know what But she was already walking away. Bag over her shoulder, silence in her step. The safety officer caught her eye and gave a grateful nod. She returned it with the faintest of smiles. Nothing more. At lane 15. She began her ritual, bag set down, target clipped. A simple bullseye sent downrange to 25 yards. The system stuttered, glitching as the clerk had warned. She didn't care. She'd shot in storms, in deserts, in places where failure wasn't a glitch but death. Magazine in, rifle up, she felt the room before she heard it. To her left, young voices, sharp and uncertain. A group of recruits in fresh ACS, fumbling through remedial marksmanship under the watchful eye of their sergeant. She glanced only, briefly, then focused on her breathing. The range's rhythm surrounded her. Shots, pauses, echoes, a symphony of controlled violence. She aligned, squeezed, exhaled, round after round, precise, deliberate. Private Marcus Chun tried not to notice her, but he couldn't help it. He had been in the army 4 months, 2 weeks and 3 days. Not that he was counting. What he was counting were his misses. 17 rounds, only 9 hits. His sergeant said he was jerking the trigger. He knew it was true. He could feel it in his shoulders, in his breath. Then he heard it. Not the erratic staccato of recruits fumbling, not the booming overcompensation of weekend warriors, but something else. From lane 15 came a rhythm so steady it seemed unnatural. Shot, breath, shot, the sound carved itself into the air, each report identical, as though measured against some invisible metronome. Marcus stole a glance. The woman, the one who'd stopped the malfunction. She was shooting with no wasted movement, no adjustment, no pause. Just pure control. Eyes on your own target, Chun. His sergeant barked, but Marcus saw him stealing glances too. She lowered her rifle, then calmly extended her target carrier. Not to 200 yards, which would have been impressive enough. Not even to 250. She sent it all the way to 300 maximum distance. Holy. Rodriguez whispered, "What's she doing?" Marcus raised his binoculars. His chest tightened. She wasn't aiming at the bullseye. She was sighting in on the chain's half-inch steel links, swaying faintly in the airflow. Targets most people ignored. Targets no one tried to hit. Her stance changed. No bench rest, no support. Standing, alone, rifle steady. She fired. The chain snapped. A target crashed down with a hollow clang. She fired again. Another fell. Marcus found himself counting. 3, 4, 5, each round exact, each strike devastating. The range began to quiet, rifles lowered, conversations stopped. Even the safety officers raised binoculars. 6, 7, 8. She didn't breathe harder. She didn't strain. Her body was stone. Her rhythm constant. 9, 10, 11. Marcus lowered his binoculars, eyes wide. His sergeant's face was unreadable, but not untouched. This was no trick, no luck. This was something else. When she finally lowered her weapon, the silence that followed was louder than any gunfire. The recruits stared. The weekend warriors whispered, and Marcus felt the words rising in his throat before he could stop them. "Sergeant," he whispered, urgent, almost afraid. I think that's Ghost Recon." The words hung heavy, like a secret spoken too loud. His sergeant's eyes snapped toward her again, sharper now. "Son, that's a very serious thing to say." But Marcus could see it, the flicker of belief behind his sergeant's eyes, because he knew it too. There was good shooting, and then there was this, and whatever she had just shown them didn't belong to the world of ordinary soldiers. What made a sergeant, a combat veteran, stop breathing for a moment at the sight of a civilian shooter? It wasn't just skill. It was the way she moved, the way she fired as if she were back in a place where missing meant dying. Sergeant David. Williams had seen plenty in his career. 3 tours, countless firefights, too many funerals. He knew what separated good from extraordinary. And what he'd just witnessed from Lane 15 belonged in a category he couldn't quite say aloud. Private. Chun was still whispering at his side, urgency quivering in his voice. Sergeant. I'm telling you, that's Ghost Recon. Williams kept his eyes on the woman, on the precise way she was cleaning her weapon. He wanted to dismiss the idea, wanted to laugh it off as a recruit's imagination, but his gut told him not to. Chun. Williams said, voice low, you don't throw that name around. Not here, not anywhere. But even as he spoke, he couldn't deny what he'd seen. Ghost Recon was supposed to be just a myth, a whisper in the shadows of briefing rooms. The kind of unit so compartmentalized that even special forces rarely admitted they existed. And yet, the woman wasn't grandstanding. She wasn't looking for attention. She was already breaking down her rifle, each piece placed with methodical precision. No wasted motion. No need to prove herself to anyone. That was the part that made William's skin prickle. Marcus couldn't let it go. Sergeant, did you see the pattern? His voice was hushed, as if saying too much would summon something dangerous. He held up his phone, sketching on the notes app with frantic strokes. She didn't just shoot the chains, she shot them in sequence. Left to right, then right to left, then center outward. That's a clearing pattern. Williams frowned, glancing at the crude diagram. He wanted to dismiss it as coincidence. But he'd been in enough combat zones to recognize rhythm when he saw it. Chun wasn't finished. The timing, exactly 2.3 seconds between shots. That's standard engagement speed for multi-target neutralization. I read about it. I swear, the sergeant kept his expression neutral, though inside, his pulse had quickened. Chun might have been a poor shot, but the kid had eyes like a hawk for detail, and he wasn't wrong. Listen to me, Private. Williams' tone sharpened. Whatever you think you saw, you keep it to yourself. You don't spread stories. Understood? Yes, Sergeant, but... Marcus hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Lane 15, where the woman now examined her rifle with clinical attention. But if I'm right, then maybe she could help us. Williams followed his gaze. The recruits were struggling. Fundamentals crumbling under stress. They'd qualify on paper, sure, but in 6 months, those kids were deploying. Some of them wouldn't come back if they didn't get better. And here was this woman, anonymous, calm, moving with the kind of quiet confidence you only earn in places no one admits to being. It was reckless. It was outside every protocol. But Williams had made riskier choices before, and sometimes they'd saved lives. He exhaled. Stay here. Keep them shooting. I'm going to talk to her. Every step toward Lane 15 felt heavier than it should. He had walked point on roads littered with IEDs. He had knocked on doors in neighborhoods where every window was a rifle barrel. But somehow, approaching this woman, this quiet, precise, unknowable woman made his chest tighten. Sarah Martinez was field-stripping her AR with the elegance of a surgeon. Each motion seamless, practiced, automatic. She didn't look up, but Williams noticed her posture shift subtly as he neared. She had already clocked him, already assessed him. Her awareness radiated in the smallest movement, a straightening of her back, the way her shoulders angled, predator awareness. He stopped at a respectful distance. Ma'am, he said, careful. Mind if I interrupt? Her hands didn't pause, but her eyes lifted, sharp and direct. They flicked over him in a scan that made him feel naked. Name tape, rank, unit patch, deployment ribbons. She read his history in less than a second. Sergeant Williams, she said evenly. What can I do for you? Even her voice carried layers, polite, neutral, but under it, something else measured caution. A woman used to people asking things they had no right to. Williams cleared his throat. I couldn't help. But notice your shooting. That was... He hesitated, then chose his words. Impressive. She gave a small nod. her eyes dropping back to her rifle. "I enjoy target practice." Deflection, short, dismissive, the kind of answer meant to end a conversation. But Williams pressed forward. "I'm here with some recruits. Young soldiers. Deploying soon. They're struggling with fundamentals. I was wondering if you might have any advice for them." Her hands paused, just for a beat. Then her eyes lifted again, this time toward the group of recruits down the line. For the first time, her mask slipped slightly, a softness in her gaze, a recognition. "What kind of problems?" she asked quietly. Williams felt hope flicker in his chest. The usual, jerking the trigger, losing sight alignment, panic under stress. They can qualify in perfect conditions, but he let the words hang. She already knew. She studied the recruits for a long moment. They were fumbling with their weapons, shoulders too tense, movements too slow. Children in uniforms, preparing to walk into places they weren't ready for. "How long have they been training?" she asked. 4 months since basic, 2 since advanced individual training. "They'll ship in 6. Her eyes lingered. Williams thought he saw something in the memory, maybe even grief. Then she spoke, her tone carrying a weight that only experience could give. Stress changes everything. Her words weren't theory. They were truth carved from experience, and Williams knew in that moment that Chun had been right. This wasn't just a hobbyist. He took a risk. "Ma'am, with respect, I get the feeling you've had training, not the kind civilians get." Her gaze sharpened. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. He felt like prey caught in the sights of something far larger than him. Then she spoke, voice careful. "I used to be in the service, long time ago." The first crack in her armor, Williams felt his pulse quicken. "What branch?" he asked gently. "Army." Her answer was vague, calculated. "Did some specialized training." Specialized training. He knew what that meant. It could mean anything. It could mean everything. Williams lowered his voice. "Look, I don't know your background, and I'm not asking. But those kids," he nodded toward the recruits, "they're good soldiers. They want to protect people. But they're not ready. Not for what's waiting for them." Her eyes followed his gaze again, and something softened further. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Just talk to them. Maybe show them a few things. Nothing formal, nothing official. Just one soldier helping another." She didn't answer right away. Her hands worked automatically, reassembling her rifle with clockwork precision. But he could see the battle in her expression, the need to stay hidden clashing with something else, the pull of responsibility, the echo of who she once was. Finally, she set the rifle aside. "I can give them an hour, but it stays here. No names, no questions, no attempts to figure me out. If anyone asks, I'm just a civilian who knows how to shoot." Williams felt relief wash over him. He nodded, understood, but she wasn't finished. Her tone sharpened, carrying a warning that sent a chill down his spine. "Sergeant, if I help them, they need to understand this isn't about looking good in uniform. This isn't about impressing anyone. This is about staying alive and bringing their friends home." He swallowed hard. "They'll understand." Sarah stood, slinging her rifle case with a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed. 5 minutes, she said. "Bring them to the tactical bay." As she walked away, Williams felt the weight of what he had just done. He had opened a door that couldn't be closed. He wasn't sure if he'd just made the smartest decision of his career or the most dangerous. What could 6 young recruits possibly learn in an hour that months of training hadn't taught them? That was the question running through Sergeant Williams' mind as he herded his soldiers into the tactical bay. He knew the answer wasn't about marksmanship alone. It was about something else, something harder to teach. Fear, survival. The weight of pulling a trigger when it wasn't paper in front of you. The bay was designed for advanced drills, movable barriers, multiple target stations, lighting rigs that could simulate anything from blinding daylight to suffocating dark. Yet what struck Williams most wasn't the facility. It was how she had rearranged it in just 5 minutes. The targets weren't in straight lines anymore. They were staggered, angled, some partially hidden behind barriers, others hanging just enough to catch peripheral vision. It looked deceptively simple, but to anyone with experience, it was geometry, the architecture of violence. "Gather up," Williams ordered. The recruits shuffled closer, forming an uneven semicircle around her, some skeptical, some curious, some trying to hide nerves. Sarah stood before them, hands at her sides, posture loose but balanced. She didn't look like an instructor. She didn't need to when she spoke. Her voice was soft but carried an authority that cut through the room. "Before we start," she said, scanning each face, "you need to understand something. What I'm going to show you isn't about looking good on a range. It's not about hitting paper. It's about survival, yours, and the people standing next to you." Private Rodriguez smirked, still carrying the nonchalance of a kid who thought war was a concept, not a reality. Sarah's eyes lingered on him a fraction longer. Her silence said enough. The smirk faded. "How many of you have been in a real fight?" she asked. A few hands rose hesitantly. "I don't mean a bar fight. I don't mean some high school scuffle. I mean a fight where someone had a weapon, where someone wanted you dead." The hands went down. Silence filled the room. Sarah nodded. "That's what I thought." She stepped closer to the first target, a silhouette at 15 yards. "Private Chun, isn't it?" Marcus nearly jolted at being called out. "Yes, ma'am. Show me your best shot." Chun raised his M4, tried to steady his breath, aimed carefully, and fired. The round punched a clean hole near center mass. "Not bad," Sarah said. "Now again, but this time," her eyes locked on his. "Imagine this target just killed your best friend. And in 3 seconds, it's going to kill you too." Chun's throat tightened. He aimed again, but his hands shook. The shot went wide. Missing entirely, Sarah's voice didn't soften. "That's the difference. Stress changes everything. Your breathing spikes. Your muscles betray you. All those neat little lessons? They fall apart." She lifted her own rifle in one fluid motion. No prolonged aim. No adjustment. Her eyes never left a target. The shot cracked. Dead center. "Point shooting," she explained. "Your body knows where the weapon points if you train it. You don't always need perfect sights. You need familiarity, confidence, trust in your hands." Another demonstration, 3 targets this time. She moved like water, firing almost before the rifle reached her shoulder. Each shot found its mark. The recruits stared, mouths parting. "Holy," Rodriguez caught himself, muttering. "Sorry, ma'am." Sarah almost smiled. "I've heard worse." Then her tone sharpened. "Who wants to learn how to do that?" For the next 40 minutes, she dismantled their understanding of shooting. Not with arrogance, but with precision. She taught them about natural point of aim, how their body could align a shot without conscious calculation. She showed them how to breathe through adrenaline, how to transition between targets without hesitation, how to prioritize threats in chaos. But it wasn't just the techniques. It was her words. She told them about fighting in places where buildings were made of mud brick, where shadows hid rifles, where seconds decided who lived. She never named the places, but her tone left no doubt she had been there. "The key," she said, engaging 3 silhouettes in rapid sequence, "isn't perfection, it's effectiveness. You don't need the prettiest shot. You need the shot that keeps you alive." Private Martinez, nervous, quiet, unrelated to Sarah despite the shared name, raised her hand. "Mom, how do you stay calm when it's real, when they're shooting back?" For the first time, Sarah hesitated. Her eyes shifted, distant, like she was staring into something they couldn't see. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. "You don't. Stay calm. Calm is a luxury you can't afford. What you learn is how to function through fear. Fear sharpens you. If you let it, fear means you want to live." The recruits listened in silence. For some, It was the first time anyone had spoken to them about fear without pretending it didn't exist. Sarah moved them through another drill targets. Hidden among civilians' split-second choices, her shots were surgical, cutting down the right silhouettes, leaving others untouched. "The hardest part isn't pulling the trigger," she said afterward. "The hardest part is living with the decision after. Every round you fire echoes longer than the sound it makes. Remember that." Even Rodriguez, the skeptic, stood straighter now. His eyes no longer carried boredom. They carried something else. Respect Chun, unable to hold back, spoke again. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" She gave a small nod. "How many times have you, done this for real?" The question hung heavy. Williams almost cut him off, but Sarah didn't react with anger. She was quiet. Her hands checked the rifle. Automatic habit, twice cleared, thrice safe. Then she answered softly. "Enough times to know every life you save matters. Enough times to know the training you're doing right now may be the difference between walking home or not." Her eyes swept over them. "You're going to face situations where there's no perfect answer, where every choice has a cost. The best you can do is be ready. And remember, you're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for the person next to you." The recruits stood still, absorbing not just the knowledge but the weight. They were young, but in that moment, they felt older. When the session ended, Sarah packed her gear with the same precision. She had shown all morning. No ceremony, no grand finale, just quiet efficiency. The recruits didn't speak. They didn't need to. They understood. Williams approached her. His gratitude was obvious in his tone. "Ma'am, I can't thank you enough." She slung her rifle case. "Eyes steady. They're good kids, Sergeant. Train them hard. Make sure they all come home." As she turned toward the exit, Chung called after her, almost desperate. "Ma'am." "Will, we see you again?" She stopped at the door. Her back was to them, but her body stilled. For a moment, the carefully built civilian mask slipped. When she turned her head, the recruits saw it. The look of someone who had lived through more than they could imagine, who carried burdens they couldn't name. "Maybe," she said softly. A hint of a smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If you're lucky." Then she was gone. The door closed with a quiet click. The recruits stood in silence, surrounded by targets that bore witness to something they couldn't fully understand. "Sergeant," Chun whispered. "Who is she really?" Williams stared at the door a long time, then looked back at his soldiers. "I don't know, son, but I think we just met someone who's been where you're going and found a way to come back." What did you say to someone who had just changed the way your soldiers saw the world? Sergeant Williams asked himself that question as he watched her shoulder her rifle case and head toward the exit. He had seen her type only once or twice before in his life, and those people hadn't been civilians. "Ma'am," he called softly. Sarah stopped, just short of the range doors. She turned with measured calm, eyes finding him with the same sharpness they always carried. Williams walked toward her, each step heavy with the weight of what he wanted to say and the limits of what he dared to ask. "Sergeant," she acknowledged. He hesitated, then found the words. "I wanted to thank you, what you gave those kids today." That wasn't just instruction. That was something else entirely. Her expression didn't shift much, but she adjusted the strap on her rifle case. A small movement, buying herself a pause before answering. "They're good soldiers," she said. "They just needed to understand why their training matters. Qualification scores don't mean anything when you're under fire." Williams nodded. He could hear the unspoken truth in her tone. She wasn't quoting doctrine. She was speaking from memory. He tried, carefully, to push further. "Those techniques you showed them, some of that looked like advanced training. The kind you don't find in manuals." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. She let the silence stretch until it became its own answer. "Finally," she said evenly, "there are a lot of good instructors out there, sergeant, military, civilian, Knowledge travels in strange ways. It was polite. It was firm. It was also a boundary. Williams understood. Push too hard, and the door would slam shut forever. He shifted, finding safer ground. I just want you to know what you did today could save lives, real lives. Those kids are deploying to Kandahar in 6 months. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. A shadow, a memory, the kind of reaction that comes when a single word cuts deeper than a blade. Kandahar. Williams saw it and knew. She'd been there. She didn't have to say it. I hope they never need to use it, she said quietly. But if they do, I hope they remember it's not about being the best shooter. It's about making sure everyone comes home. Through the glass wall of the tactical bay, both of them could see the recruits. They were still practicing, moving differently now, carrying themselves with a seriousness that hadn't been there that morning. Private Chun was coaching Rodriguez, his enthusiasm finally matched by competence. Private Martinez was running drills with a focus that surprised even her sergeant. They look different, Williams murmured. They understand the stakes now, Sarah replied. That changes everything. Williams wanted to ask her 100 things. Where she had served, who she had been, why someone with skills like hers was here in suburban Virginia, shooting at a public range. But he knew the answers weren't his to have. Some stories stayed sealed in the dark. Ma'am, he said instead, his tone softer, if you're ever back here on a Saturday, if you see us struggling again. She studied him, her face unreadable. Then just barely she smiled. The first genuine warmth he'd seen from her all day. I come here most Saturday mornings, Sergeant, usually around 9, quieter than. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't dismissal either. Williams gave a short nod. Thank you. She turned toward the door, but paused. Sergeant, tell your recruits something for me. Yes, ma'am. Tell them the real enemy isn't the target they're shooting at. It's hesitation. In combat, the one who acts first usually comes home. The one who hesitates usually doesn't. Her words cut through him like cold steel, delivered not as theory, not as advice, but as the distilled truth of experience. I'll tell them, he said, his voice low. She nodded, then pushed through the doors and stepped into the late afternoon light. Williams lingered, watching her cross the parking lot. She walked to an ordinary Honda Civic, a vehicle so aggressively average, it was almost camouflage. She loaded her gear with the same deliberate care she had shown on the line, scanned her surroundings with the casual awareness of someone who never truly let their guard down, and drove away without looking back. He stayed at the window long after her taillights disappeared. Behind him, footsteps approached. Private Chun's face was flushed, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. What is it, Chun? Williams asked, not taking his eyes off the empty lot. Sir, I just wanted to thank you for arranging that, for letting us learn from her. Williams finally turned, his expression unreadable. Someone like what? Private? Chun hesitated. His voice dropped to something quieter, almost reverent. Someone who knows what it's really like. Someone who's been where we're going. Williams studied him. What makes you think that? The way she talked about fear, Chun said. About using it, not letting it control you. The way she spoke about decisions, you don't learn that from books. Sergeant, you learn that from experience, real experience. Williams let the words settle. Through the glass, he could see the recruits still working. Their clumsy mistakes of the morning had been replaced with urgency, focus, and something else, belief. Chun, he said finally, his voice firm. What happened here today stays. Here, no stories, no posts online, no guessing games about who she is. Understood? Yes, Sergeant. Good. Now get back in there. You've got 5 months to turn your squad into soldiers who come home. Chun nodded sharply and jogged back to the bay. Williams stood alone at the window for another moment. The range was quieter now. Only a few diehards remained. their shots echoing like faint reminders of something larger. Somewhere in suburban Virginia, Sarah Martinez was driving home, probably to a neighborhood of trimmed lawns, probably to a daughter waiting with homework or a grocery list left on the counter. She had carved a new life, one stitched from normality, but he knew in his bones that she carried shadows too deep to ever fully leave behind. She had given his soldiers a gift today, not just skill, not just technique, but perspective, a glimpse into what combat truly demanded, the ability to act through fear, to carry decisions that never stopped echoing. And Williams, standing there, in the hum of the range, realized something else. Legends didn't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they drove Civics, shopped for groceries, and tried to blend into PTA meetings. But sometimes, if you were lucky, they stepped out of the shadows. For an hour, just long enough to remind young soldiers what survival really looked like. Why did the quiet drive home feel harder than anything she had faced in uniform? Sarah Martinez gripped the steering wheel, eyes scanning the road like she always did. Every mirror, every shadow, a habit she had never shaken. She told herself. It was just good awareness, but she knew the truth. It was survival, long ingrained, now impossible to unlearn. The neighborhoods blurred past trimmed lawns, mailboxes, kids on bicycles. A world so safe it felt like fiction. A world she had fought for, bled for. Now she lived in it, invisible among the people she had once protected from afar. She pulled into her driveway, the Civic humming into silence. For a moment she stayed inside, staring at the front door. Inside was her daughter. Inside was normal life. But normal came at a cost. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Mom, can you help me with math homework?" Sarah exhaled, a faint smile tugging at her lips. That text was her anchor, the thing that kept her here instead of slipping back into the shadows where she once belonged. She unlocked the door. The smell of home greeted her, coffee from the morning pot, detergent from freshly washed clothes, something faintly sweet from a candle her daughter had lit. "Mom!" The voice was bright, ordinary, cutting through the silence that usually lived in Sarah's chest. Her daughter ran up, ponytail bouncing, notebook in hand. "Can you help me?" "I don't get fractions." Sarah set her rifle case down, pushing it quietly into the hall closet before the girl could glance too long at it. She knelt, pulling her daughter close for a quick hug. "Fractions, huh? We'll figure it out." It was surreal sometimes that she could spend 1 hour teaching recruits how to function under the weight of fear, and the next teaching her daughter how to divide numbers. Both felt important, both mattered, but only one let her forget what her hands had done overseas. They sat at the kitchen table, pencils, erasers, a half-eaten granola bar beside the homework sheet. Her daughter chewed on her lip, frustrated. Sarah leaned over the page. "Okay, think of it like this. If you have a pizza, and you cut it into 8 slices, and I eat 3, you'd never eat 3. Her daughter interrupted, grinning. Sarah laughed softly. "Fair, but imagine, what fraction of the pizza is left?" Her daughter's brow furrowed, then cleared. 5/8. Exactly. Sarah ruffled her hair. "See? Easy." For a while it was just that. Fractions, laughter, ordinary life. The kind of moment she clung to like a lifeline. But later, when her daughter was upstairs, Sarah found herself in the living room, sitting in silence. Her eyes drifted to the closet where her gear was stored. She thought about the recruits, how young they looked, how wide their eyes had been when she told them about fear, how quickly they had understood the stakes when she put it into words no one else dared to speak. Williams had said they were deploying to Kandahar. The word alone was enough to bring back a rush of heat, dust, and a metallic taste of adrenaline. Kandahar wasn't a place you forgot. It lived in the bones. She closed her eyes. Memories slipped through night raids, quick decisions, the silence that followed gunfire, the things she never told anyone, not her neighbors, not even her daughter. especially not her daughter. The world believed heroes came home with medals. What they didn't see were the ones who came home with silence. Back at the range, the recruits were still buzzing from the session. Private Rodriguez, who had been the least invested, now moved with sharper intent. He replayed Sarah's drills in his head, mimicking her stance, forcing himself not to hesitate when switching targets. Private Martinez had found a new rhythm in her movements. Not perfect, not polished, but steady. She told herself over and over what Sarah had said. You're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for the person next to you. And Marcus Chun felt like his world had cracked open. For months, he had struggled to prove himself, to convince others and himself that he belonged. But when Sarah had looked at him, when she had spoken of fear, not as weakness, but as something you carried, he had felt something shift. That night, he sat in the barracks scribbling in a small notebook. His brother had once told him stories he wasn't supposed to repeat, whispers, of operators who never wore patches, who trained in ways most soldiers never saw. He had dismissed them as myth, but now, he thought he had seen one. Sergeant Williams noticed the change too. He didn't say much, but he watched them closely. Their movements, their seriousness, something had taken root. Something he couldn't give them with lectures or drills, something Sarah had given them in less than an hour. But with it came danger. If she truly was who Chun suspected, then she wasn't just a gift. She was a risk. Ghosts didn't like being seen, and Williams had a sinking feeling that if she ever sensed she had been exposed, she would vanish without a trace. Sarah sat awake that night long after her daughter had gone to bed. She cradled a mug of tea, untouched, cooling in her hands. The quiet of the house pressed against her. She thought about the recruits, about William's careful eyes, about Chun's whisper, Ghost Recon. The name was supposed to be a myth, something young soldiers mentioned between video games and late-night speculation. But sometimes myths were born from truth. She knew that better than most. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. Not the woman she had once been. Not entirely. The uniform was gone. The call signs, the missions, the classified files locked away forever. She had buried that part of herself when she built this life. PTA meetings, soccer games, helping with fractions. But the range had reminded her that ghosts didn't stay buried. Not really. They lingered. They waited. They surfaced when you least expected it. She sipped the tea. Finally, it was bitter. The next Saturday, Williams returned to the range with his recruits. He told them not to expect her. But all of them glanced at lane 15 when they walked in. It was empty. Still, they carried themselves differently. They trained harder, more focused. Each shot carried the weight of her words. The real enemy isn't the target. It's hesitation. Williams watched them. They weren't great yet, but they were better. And for the first time, he believed maybe, just maybe, they would come home, but a part of him couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she had vanished into her Civic, slipping back into a world that didn't know what she carried. And he wondered, what would it take to pull her back again? Why did the word Kandahar feel like a wound reopening? Sarah Martinez lay in bed that night, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of her daughter's breathing down the hall. She should have been able to sleep. She should have been able to fold this day into the pile of ordinary Saturdays. But William's words kept circling back. Kandahar. The name wasn't just a place. It was heat that never lifted, dust that clung to your lungs, nights lit by tracer fire. It was friends she would never see again. It was the place where she had stopped being someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend, and become something else. Her body remembered before her mind did. She felt the phantom weight of her rifle pressed into her palms, the dry burn of adrenaline under her tongue, the silence that followed an explosion, silence so heavy it rang in her bones. She closed her eyes, and the ceiling shifted into memory. The compound had smelled of smoke and blood, mud walls crumbling, doorways dark and waiting. Her team moved like shadows, each step calculated, each breath measured. She'd have been the one on point that night. Her boots silent, her rifle steady. Her heart drumming so fast she thought the others might hear it. A shout, a muzzle flash. The wall near her cheek shattered into dust. She dropped low, returned fire. A silhouette fell. Another emerged. Her sight picture narrowed. Her body moving before thought could form. Left corner, 2 o'clock. Her teammate shouted, but she had already seen it, already moved, already fired. The man collapsed before the words finished. They cleared the room, one by one. Always one more shadow. Always one more door. Until silence claimed the compound again. Afterward, she sat against a wall, sweat running into her eyes. The acrid smell of burned powder filling her chest. Her hand shook only after it was over. She hated that part, the body's rebellion once the mind gave it permission. That night, she had stared at the moon above Kandahar and thought, I will never be the same person again. And she hadn't been. A car horn jolted her back to the present. She blinked. Morning light spilled across her bedroom. Her daughter was knocking on the door. Mom, you awake? We're going to be late for the game. Sarah rubbed her eyes, pushing the ghost back down. She forced herself into motion coffee. Car keys, cleats in a duffel. She wore the face her neighbors knew, the face her daughter trusted, but inside. Kandahar still pulsed, stubborn as a scar, at the soccer field. She sat in the bleachers, cheering with the other parents. She smiled when her daughter scored, clapped when the team won, laughed at the post-game chatter. To anyone else, she was just another mother. Only she knew that every sideline cheer was layered over memories of shouting in languages she couldn't forget. When her daughter hugged her afterward, sweaty and grinning, Sarah held on a second longer than usual. She needed that contact, that proof of life. Meanwhile, at the range, Sergeant Williams pushed his recruits harder than ever. He saw the way Sarah's words had changed them. They no longer shot just for qualification. They shot as though each round might decide survival, Rodriguez once. Lazy now focused with sharp determination. Private Martinez, once timid, now found confidence in her stance. And Chun had transformed. His shots were still inconsistent, but his mind was sharper. He noticed things others missed. He analyzed angles, timing, threats. Williams began to wonder if the kid's real gift wasn't pulling the trigger, but seeing the bigger picture. But even as they improved, Williams carried unease. He replayed Sarah's final words. The real enemy is hesitation, delivered with the certainty of someone who had seen hesitation kill. He wondered if it was fair to place that weight on such young shoulders. They were barely out of training, barely old enough to drink, and now they carried lessons forged in fire they couldn't yet imagine. Still, Williams couldn't deny what he saw. They were stronger now, better, and in 6 months, they would need every edge they could get. Sarah tried not to return to the range the next weekend. She told herself she didn't need to. She told herself it had been a one-time thing. But Saturday morning came, and by 9 a.m., her hands were already packing her bag. At lane 15, the same familiar rhythm returned. Rifle, target, breathing, shot. She told herself it was therapy, that it was just practice. But every round she fired was also a conversation with ghosts. She noticed the recruits again, saw their stances, their improved timing, the way they carried themselves. They were learning. Williams was pushing them. And though she never turned her head, she could feel their eyes flick toward her. Hoping, wondering, she finished her drills, field stripped her rifle, and packed with her usual precision. But when she glanced up, she caught Williams' gaze across the firing line. He gave a subtle nod. Not a request, not a question, just acknowledgement. She returned it, then left. That night, Sarah stood at her daughter's bedroom door, watching the girl sleep, the soft rise and fall of her chest, the peacefulness only children seemed to carry. Sarah envied it. She touched the doorframe lightly, a small ritual, a promise. You will never know the things I've seen. You will never carry what I carry. But deep down, she feared the truth. The ghosts had a way of spilling into every life. The recruits gathered after drills, exhaustion pulling at their faces. They sat in a rough circle, rifles propped against the wall. Rodriguez broke the silence. She's not just some civilian, you know that, right? No one answered. Chun stared at the floor. She's something else. My brother told me once, there are units so far beyond us, they don't even have names. That's her. Has to be. Private Martinez shifted uneasily. Does it matter? Whoever she is, she's trying to help us. Rodriguez shook his head. It matters, because people like that, they don't just disappear into civilian life for no reason. Chun looked up, voice quiet but firm. Then maybe the reason doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is what she gave us. And if we're smart, we'll hold on to it. They fell into silence again. Young soldiers carrying words heavier than their rifles. Later that week, Sarah drove home from work with her daughter in the passenger seat. The girl chattered about school, friends, dreams. Sarah smiled, responded, asked questions. But inside, another voice lingered. Williams, Chun's whisper, her own memories. Ghost Recon. She had spent years bearing that name, pretending it had never belonged to her. Pretending she had been just another soldier in just another war. But the truth was harder. She had been part of something most people would never understand. And, though she had walked away, the name still clung to her. At a red light, she looked at her daughter. Innocent, untouched, she whispered, so softly the girl didn't hear. I left for you. The light turned green. She drove on. Why was it always the nights that betrayed her? The days she could manage coffee, errands, cheering at her daughter's soccer matches, helping with homework. But when the house went quiet, when her daughter's breathing softened into sleep, that was when the ghost came back. Sarah Martinez sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of tea. She hadn't taken a sip in 20 minutes. Her mind was elsewhere. Kandahar again. Always Kandahar. She remembered a night. Patrol. The heat trapped inside body armor. The weight of a rifle that felt heavier with each step. The way silence would stretch just before everything broke. And then the sudden flash. The crack of rounds splitting the air. The instinctive roll into cover. She had fired without hesitation. Her training making decisions faster than thought. She survived because she didn't pause. Because she didn't let fear freeze her. But what haunted her wasn't the fight itself. It was afterward. The way her hands shook uncontrollably while she reloaded. The way she looked at her team and realized one was missing. Gone in the space between breaths, she whispered now into the silence of her kitchen. I didn't hesitate, but I still couldn't. Save him. Her daughter stirred upstairs. Sarah quickly wiped at her eyes, forcing herself back into the present. Ghosts stayed where they were. She had a promise to keep, to protect her child from ever knowing that kind of weight. At the range, Sergeant Williams stood with his recruits, watching them work. He could see the difference. Their stances sharper, their breathing steadier, their eyes harder. Sarah's words had rooted themselves in every drill. Again. Williams barked. Private Martinez and Rodriguez pivoted through a moving drill, engaging targets without pause. Better. Still sloppy, but better. Chun, though, was different. He wasn't the best shot. He still missed more than he hit, but his focus had deepened. He saw things, angles, timing, patterns. Williams noticed how Chun corrected his teammates now, almost unconsciously. It was like he had inherited part of Sarah's way of seeing the battlefield. But Williams also noticed something else. A weight on all of them, a shadow hanging over every round they fired. They knew deployment loomed. They knew Kandahar wasn't just a word. It was a test, and tests like that didn't always end with everyone coming home. After drills, Williams dismissed them, but Chun lingered. Sergeant, he said, voice low. Do you think she'll come back? Williams looked at. Lane 15, empty. Always empty until she decided otherwise. She comes when she wants to, he said finally. That's not up to us, but... Chun hesitated, then pressed. Don't you want to know who she really is? Williams studied the young private. Wanting to know and needing to know aren't the same thing. Chun frowned. But if she's who I think she is, enough. Williams cut him off. You start chasing ghosts, private, and you'll lose focus on the fight right in front of you. And in Kandahar, that'll get you killed. Chun swallowed hard and nodded. But the question didn't leave either of them. The following Saturday, Sarah returned. She told herself she wouldn't. But at 9 a.m., she was there. Lane 15. Same bag, same ritual. This time, Williams didn't wait. He approached as she reassembled her rifle. Morning, ma'am. Her eyes flicked up. That same quick scan. That same weighing of threat and intent. Sergeant. He hesitated, then chose honesty. They're different now. Because of you. I don't think they'll ever be the same soldiers they were before that hour you gave them. Sarah didn't answer. She simply set her rifle down and waited. Williams took a risk. I've seen a lot of shooters. A lot of good ones. But what? You did, that's beyond training. That's something else. And I need to know. Not for me, but for them. Who are you really? Her eyes hardened. For a long moment, she said nothing. The weight of silence pressed between them, thick as steel. Finally, she spoke. You don't want that answer, Sergeant. Williams held her gaze. Maybe not, but I think I already know. Her jaw tightened. She leaned closer. Voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. Then keep it to yourself. Because the moment you say it out loud, you put me, you, and those kids in danger. Do you understand? Williams nodded slowly. He did. More than she knew. Sarah straightened, her mask sliding back into place. You want to help them? Train them harder. Push them past their limits. Don't wait for me. She slung her rifle case over her shoulder and turned away. Conversation over. Williams watched her go, his chest heavy. He had pushed, and she had warned him. That was enough. That night, Sarah sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, brushing hair back from the girl's forehead as she slept. Her daughter murmured something incoherent, shifting deeper into dreams. Sarah smiled faintly, but her chest ached. She thought of the recruits, of Williams, of the dangerous line she was walking. She had promised herself she was done, that she had left it all behind. But watching those kids, watching the fear and the doubt in their eyes, she couldn't help but remember her own first deployment. How unready she had been. How much she had wished someone had told her the truth before. She boarded that plane. Her daughter stirred again, and Sarah whispered into the dark, if helping them means risking myself, maybe that's worth it. But the thought terrified her, because ghosts who stepped back into the light rarely stayed hidden for long. Weeks passed. The recruits grew sharper, faster, stronger, but the closer they came to deployment, the heavier. The silence grew among them. In the barracks, Rodriguez admitted one night, I'm scared, man. Private Martinez looked down. We all are. Chen nodded. She said fear is not weakness. She said it keeps you alive. Rodriguez shook his head. Easy for her to say. She's not the one shipping out in 5 weeks. But none of them corrected him. None of them dared say aloud what they were all thinking. Maybe she understood better than anyone exactly what shipping out meant. Sergeant Williams lay awake in his quarters that night. He thought about the recruits, about Sarah, about the way her eyes had flinched at the word Kandahar. He knew he had stumbled into something far bigger than he could explain. And he also knew he had a choice. Press harder, risk shattering whatever fragile balance Sarah had built, or respect her silence and trust that what she had already given was enough. He closed his eyes, hearing her words again. The real enemy is hesitation. He wondered if those words were meant for the recruits or for him. In her home, Sarah sat in the living room, staring at the photo on the mantel. Her daughter at 8 years old, graying with missing teeth, innocent, pure. The reason Sarah had walked away, but her reflection in the glass of the frame wasn't a mother. It was a soldier, a ghost. And for the first time in years, she admitted it to herself. She wasn't done, no matter how far she ran. Why did the ordinary world feel so fragile once you'd seen it from the outside? Sarah Martinez sat in her car, parked in front of the grocery store, watching families come and go. Carts rattling, kids bickering, the faint music of a weekend. Morning spilling from sliding glass doors. It was so normal, so unremarkable, and yet she couldn't stop thinking of the recruits. 6 faces, each carrying more weight now than they had a month ago. 6 lives about to be dropped into Kandahar. She had told herself it was just 1 hour, just one lesson, but that wasn't true anymore. They had pulled something out of her she thought she had buried forever, and part of her feared that by helping them, she had awoken something in herself she could never put back to sleep. She stepped out of the car, pushed her way through the store like everyone else. Milk, bread, vegetables, small rituals, civilian camouflage, but every aisle felt like a thin veil. Her phone buzzed, a message from Williams. Just 2 words. They ship. She closed her eyes, leaning against the handle of the cart. They were leaving at the range that weekend. Lane 15 was empty. Williams stood with his recruits one last time before they deployed. He said the usual. Words, encouragement, warnings, promises that if they stuck together, they had a chance. But as he looked at their faces, he knew none of them would forget her. The quiet woman who had shown them more in an hour than months of training had managed, after drills. Chum lingered, looking at the empty lane. She's not coming back, is she? He asked. Williams placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe not, but you already carry what she gave you. That's enough. Chun nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed fixed on lane 15. Sarah spent deployment day in her kitchen, pacing. She hadn't told Williams she wouldn't come. She hadn't told him anything at all, but she felt the pull in her chest, like a string tugging her toward the airfield where 6 young soldiers would board a plane into darkness. She pressed her hand against the counter, forcing herself still. If she went, she risked too much. If she stayed, she felt like she was abandoning them. Her daughter ran into the room, waving a permission slip for a field trip. Can you sign this, Mom? Sarah took the paper, signed her name in neat cursive. Sarah Martinez, just a mother. Just a woman on Maple Street. Her daughter hugged her quickly, then darted upstairs. Sarah stayed at the counter, pen still in hand, and whispered to no one. In particular, come home safe. The recruits landed in Kandahar 2 days later. Dust in the air, heat pressing down. The real thing. No longer targets on a range. Now it was buildings, alleys, figures in the distance. They carried their rifles. Differently now, not sloppily, not carelessly. Each movement carried the shadow of her voice. Don't hesitate. Fear isn't weakness, it's fuel. Williams watched them closely. He felt pride, but also dread. He knew no amount of training guaranteed anything here. But he also knew they were better than they would have been without her. And sometimes, that margin was the difference between funerals and homecomings back in Virginia. Sarah kept their life stitched together. School runs, PTA meetings, Saturday mornings at the range. Lane 15 remained her refuge. She never asked about the recruits. She never contacted Williams again. But sometimes, when she loaded her rifle, she imagined them far away, carrying pieces of her in their movements. She fired, slow and deliberate. Each shot a prayer she could never say aloud. Weeks later, Williams returned home briefly on leave. He went to the range out of habit. Lane 15 was occupied by her. She looked up as he approached. That same quick scan, that same assessment. Sergeant, she said simply. Ma'am. He replied. For a long moment, neither spoke. The cracks of other rifles filled the silence. Finally, Williams said, They're holding up better than I expected. Some of what you gave them. It's keeping them alive. Sarah's eyes lowered, Her hands kept moving, cleaning her rifle with the same deliberate care. "Good," she said quietly. "That's enough." Williams wanted to tell her more. He wanted to say that Rodriguez had found his grit, that Martinez had become steady under fire, that Chun had begun to see the battlefield in ways beyond his years. But he didn't. She didn't ask, and he sensed she didn't want details. Instead, he said, "They still look for you. Every time we're at the range." Sarah's expression didn't change, but for just a second, he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Pride, regret, maybe both. She stood, shouldering her case. "Tell them. The fight isn't about glory. It's about the person next to them. Tell them that's what matters." "I will," Williams said. She gave him one last look, then walked out. The door closed behind her with its usual soft click. Months later, Williams received a message from Kandahar. One of the recruits had been injured, but alive. The others had pulled him out, fast, decisive, no hesitation. He read the report twice, then folded it away. He thought of her words again. Hesitation. Kills. And he realized they had carried her lesson into the fire and back again. Sarah never heard about it. She never asked. But one Saturday, while standing at lane 15, she paused between shots and felt a strange calm in her chest. For once, the ghosts were quiet. She set her rifle down, exhaled, and whispered to herself, "Maybe that's enough." Sergeant Williams would remember her for years, not as a name in a file, not as a legend in whispers, but as a quiet woman at a range who had stepped out of her ordinary life long enough to shape soldiers heading into war. And he knew his recruits would carry her voice long after the sound of her rifle faded, because some lessons didn't come from manuals. Some came from ghosts who had walked into the fire and returned with scars they never showed. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.